All right, next up is a beautiful two-player Williams game. San Francisco really captures the theme of San Francisco in a kind of a happier time, I guess you could say. You can see in the background the Golden Gate Bridge and the bay detailed there, and little parts of Chinatown. What looks like, in this case, it could be some of the streetcars that were still running at that time, I think, but also the cable cars, of course, that are the famous part of San Francisco as well. So, very beautiful artwork in the back box, and again, the art continues on in the playfield with the kind of Chinatown theme and the Golden Gate Bridge in the background of the flipper area. Excuse me. Next up is Williams' famous Beat Time. This is obviously in response to the popularity of the Beatles. There was no way that they were going to be able to get a Beatles license, and so they kind of created this off-brand take on the back glass. This is original back glass. You can see it's got some challenges to this, but the artwork on the back glass of the Boodles is pretty hilarious too on that. In the playfield, you have some of the kind of better examples of very kind of mod artwork. You can see that the dancers there on the playfield go all the way up from the flippers all the way up to the middle of the game and so forth. And this has a rotating target in the center that changes around for the 3, 6, 9, and 12. Another amusing feature of this game's artwork is the kind of fake band names that were made up in the center of the playfield there. I'm not sure who made those band names up, but they didn't quite work out. And of course, bonus points for anyone who knows what the bottom one, the Low Humbles, is supposed to be referring to. Of course, those guys are still on tour, I think, so it should be a little bit easier. Mini Cycle, I love this too, because in here you have something that is completely resurged, certainly in Southern California. Everybody riding around on these various forms of small motorcycles, mini cycles in the parlance at the time. And it's just great, the sort of youth culture aspect that's going on in the back glass of this game is fantastic. And again, that carries on into the playfield. This playfield layout is very cool because it has a kind of series of rollovers, so you make that shot all the way up to the top. And there's the girl on the minicycle in the bottom. A couple more examples in the butyrates of sort of the youth culture of the time, which was a recurrent theme in the 60s for Gottlieb. Here's a less often seen game. Certainly Williams two-player Jumpin' Jacks. The multiplayer Williams games tend to be from the 60s less often seen for various reasons. It's cool to see this one, and it's beautiful to see it in this condition. Once again, this is coming from the obvious rise of the Playboy empire, where you started to have Playboy clubs. You couldn't have a Playboy pinball machine at that time, but you could have girls with bunny suits on. But what we seem to do to ameliorate some objections that might be for that is to kind of tie that into what seems to be kind of a circus theme. So it's a little bit of each. On the playfield, there's some cool things in the butyrates and all that. Now you're flipping plastic, which to me is another iconic image from the 60s pinballs that you don't see very often. And again, more of the ladies bouncing around with the sort of devil and angel response to what they're seeing. So this is cool, kind of an alternate take. Later in the auction, you're going to see a Slick Chick. This was Gottlieb's response to the same subject, and it's cool to see Jumpin' Jacks because this is not a game you see very often. I think this is the only one I've ever seen. Williams created in the 50s, they actually created a horse race machine called Hayburners. And this is a modernized version of that called Winner. And its distinctive feature is that in the center of the playfield, through acrylic, you can actually see the racing horses advance as you hit the targets in the back, the 1 through 6 targets. This is a flipper pinball machine with a turret shooter, so you push the button to launch the ball when it's pointing where you want to go. And then you see there's upper flippers as well to help you hit those targets. So kind of cool semi-modernist kind of art in the back glass. It's kind of got a distinctive look to it, and it carries down into the plastics. This is a pretty nice condition for this title. Gottlieb Super Score, two-player pinball machine, and this is one of a handful of machines that were produced in pinball history that is themed around well, playing pinball. So you could see in the back box, you could see the ladies in this Art Stenholm piece of art engaging in some friendly pinball play, and the game that they are playing is kind of shown in the back glass. You can see that what's actually being shown there is a little bit different. In the back of the back box, you will see that on the left there is this very pinball machine. So it's infinitely recursive. SuperScore has a SuperScore in the back box, and if you could only see it, it's obscured, thankfully, because otherwise we'd have infinite recursion. That SuperScore presumably in the back box has another SuperScore, and then on and on and on and on forever. Great pinball back glass. If they made a t-shirt of this, I'd buy it. The pinball playfield is most notable for the central spinner that's in the bottom of the playfield, which occurs when you get various objectives, the holes in the center of the playfield. Also, the 4 flipper layout makes this an unusual game. So that's Gottlieb SuperScore. From that, we jump over to Williams Superflight. The attempt to evolve supersonic flight was definitely a topic of great interest in the 1970s. And this game captures kind of one vision of what that supersonic flight might be like. It was around this time that Concorde development actually progressed, and not long after this game actually became a reality in slightly different form. But there were still competing Concorde-style supersonic aircraft, and at one point it looked like we might actually produce something in the United States that did not come to pass. But Superflight is a reflection of that. Tremendous backglass art on this game. I love this. It's shooting above the clouds with a purple background. Maybe I have a thing for purple pinball machines, I don't know. But in the playfield, you can see that the layout is a very kind of roundabout layout. You're trying to complete the 12 targets, ABCD, 12 stand-ups, and the bumpers help you with that task. But it leads to a kind of a fun game where you're trying to make some fairly distant direct shots, and sometimes you get help with the bumpers to make those shots. Our first baseball here, not too many baseballs in this auction. This is a Chicago Coin All-Star Baseball, and this is a fairly good example of that. It has animated lights in the back glass to show the position of the batters, or the runners on base, and then the different targets there indicate what you're going to get to advance that runner. Otherwise, basic kind of baseball game approach with the single bat. This is not a flipper game, it's a bat game. And another bat game, Williams Fastball. This has the kind of angular art from, I believe, Christian Marsh in this one. And this is a super wide body machine. In contrast, you can kind of see the relative width of the conventional pinball width on All-Star Baseball and the Fastball. It's just a huge wide machine, pretty much the widest pinball machine other than Hercules that I know of. I guess it's a bat game, but same idea. And that's how that one works. So this has an animated back box with runners that run around in the backspace. And that completes this run of EMs in part 3 of the Captain's Auction.